Hello YouTube, my name is John Ardelli and I'm from Sydney, Nova Scotia, Canada, and I'd like to talk to you tonight about quality of manufacture of household appliances. It's a rather strange subject out of nowhere from me, but a reason this occurred to me is, well, I can't sleep tonight, and whenever I can't sleep, one of my favorite things to do is to sit around on YouTube and just fire random stuff through the YouTube search, see if I can find anything unusual to watch. And usually I do this just by, thinking of random stuff off the top of my head. Well, I happened to think about electric fans at one point, because I used to love watching electric fans spin when I was a kid, so it just, popped into my head. And I started thinking, I wonder if I can find any electric fans from the era when I was growing up. And I found a few of those. But then I started thinking about Titanic. And the next thing that occurred to me was, hey, they had electric fans in the third-class staterooms. For any cabins that were inside the ship didn't have portholes. And I was thinking, wait now, Titanic was built in 1912. Just how far back does the concept of the electric fan as we know it today go? So I did a search on Wikipedia and discovered that it goes back as far as 1890. And I thought, just out of curiosity, I wonder if there are any really old fans that people had restored on YouTube, see if any of them got any of them running. And as you can see in my favorites, I found several of them. And I was fascinated because I was thinking to myself, wait now, these fans are over 100 years old. There was one in there, I think of my favorites there, from 1900, and it's still running. And I'm thinking, I have two fans in this apartment. One, which is only 4 years old, is already broken, and the other one is like 15 years old. It's still running now, but it's mostly made of plastic. So is it likely to be running in 2110? Somehow, I doubt it. Because, making stuff out of plastic, excuse me, everything that's made today, almost everything, is always made of plastic. They never make anything out of metal anymore. Well, people might say, well, it takes a lot more resources to make stuff out of metal. It's more expensive to make stuff out of metal. And if it takes up all that more resources, it's probably not as good for the environment. Well, I'm not so sure about that. If we were so concerned about the environment, we're thinking, all right, we can make stuff like, household appliances like fans and stuff out of plastic, but then they don't last forever. And where do they end up when they break? You guessed it, in the landfill. Or at least, like some people might make attempt to recycle them, but a lot of people won't. And they end up in the garbage, they end up in the landfill, they end up causing an environmental problem. What's the solution? Well, maybe if we made things a little more solid, we wouldn't need to be replacing stuff and wouldn't keep putting stuff in the landfill. Like, for example, most of the appliances I have in the apartment here are relatively new because I'm only living here for 10 years. But there is one exception, and I'd like to show it to you. When I was moving out of my grandmother and my uncle raised me, and when I was moving out, I happened to look over at the counter, and I said, I need a blender. I wish I could take that one. And I was looking at the blender they had in the kitchen. I used to love that blender because when I was growing up, I used to love to make milkshakes, and I had used that blender more times than I can remember, and so it sort of had a nostalgic aspect to me. Oh, by the way, I've made all those years making milkshakes, experimenting. I came up with one of the best milkshake recipes you'll ever taste. It's called the Ultimate Malted Milkshake. If you're interested in the recipe, drop me a line. I'll send it to you. Anyway, when I said that I wished I could have it, my uncle happened to say, well, you know what? We haven't used it in years. We really don't need it. If you want it, go ahead, take it. So I did. And a few months after I moved in, I was curious of how old this blender was, because the house was built in 1957, and that blender had been there since I was a kid in the mid-1970s to late 1970s. So I thought, I'll bet you it's even older than that, because it's hardly brand new when I was using it. So I took it out. And I went over and I looked at it. Now this, as it turns out, is a Osterizer Model 235 blender. That's what it said on the bottom plate, because that's what I did. I took this off, I flipped her over, I looked underneath here, and it said patents pending 1952, 1957, 1961. 1961 implies that, of course, it would have to have been made on or after that year. So let's say this was purchased in 1962-63. That would be consistent with the age of the house. And so this blender is almost 50 years old. And guess what? It works perfectly. In fact, it works better than most modern blenders do today. To give you an idea of how well this thing works, let me hold it up for you here. Here's watch this thing when I turn on the motor. You see how it kicked around in my hand there? That's how powerful the motor is. This thing will grind through just about anything. When I used to make the milkshakes, there were times when the freezer would freeze the ice cream a little too solid, and it would be like I'd have to crank it out of the frickin' carton with the scoop. And if I put it in there, you wouldn't think the blender would get through it, but no. And the blender would actually tremble. It'd actually jump a couple of times trying to get through stuff. That's how the motor would be pushing against the force, and it would still get through it. And this thing will eat through just about anything. So, the controls, of course, are very simple. It doesn't have like those 10 settings you see on modern blenders, but this is all you really need. Simplicity has its advantages. The more complicated something is, the more stuff can break. This is the original knob that the thing came from. There's nothing. It's never broken. It's never had any problems with it. And even if you want to do pulse, if you got something really hard to mix, you don't need a pulse switch. You can just diddle with the switch. And it pulses just fine without an actual dedicated pulse switch. So the simplicity really serves this. It's the fact that it still works today. And it made me think, why can't we make stuff that lasts? Because guess where that didn't end up? This blender did not end up in a landfill. In fact, even the smallest parts of it, excuse me, I'm going to get under here and unplug it. Even the smallest parts of it still function. Even it has the original plug and cord. Original 2-prong non-polarized plug. Yeah, I know people will make a case for the fact that this isn't as safe as a 3-prong plug, and I understand that, but I could always retrofit a 3-prong plug on here if I wanted to, I suppose. But I don't see any point to that, because the way I see it is the only way it could be dangerous is if you accidentally knocked it over into the sink. And the thing is so freaking heavy, chances you're going to knock it over into anything are slim and none. Just keep it away from the sink, you're fine. And in fact, even the original insulation is still intact. It's a little dried out, couple little chips, but insulation is not too hard to fix. So that's what's that just amazed me. That these old appliances still work, and that means you can keep passing them on. They can keep being functional in kitchens for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. It's not like a blender needs computerized controls or anything. I'm sure that if this is still running in 100 years, and I have no doubt it will be, somebody could still be using it. And I think that would be better for our environment, not have to throw things out in the first place. So that's my take on it. So next time I go to get a new appliance, whatever it may be, I'm going to think to myself, is this a new appliance that it simply wasn't available in the past? Or is it something that was available in the past that I might be able to find an antique version? Next time I get an electric fan, I get a can opener, or whatever else I need, I'm going to be looking in antique shops. Forget the local superstore or Walmart or wherever, because the best stuff you can find is the old stuff. Okay, maybe some stuff isn't as power efficient. I suppose it depends on what you're getting. But if you want something that lasts, that's built solid, that you won't have to throw out in 5 years, antiques are the way to go. I'm starting to see the fascination with antiques, actually. Anyway, that's my take on the quality of manufacture. And hopefully I'll come up with some more interesting things to do on YouTube. The problem is I don't have an external camera. The only camera I have is built into my computer here. So it's hard to come up with interesting ideas to put out on YouTube, but we'll see what I come up with over the next several months, if anything. Or if you're more interested in my writing, you can always go visit my blog. It's in my profile there. Anyway, thanks for watching, and you have a good night, YouTube.